It will be impossible to take all the questions, but I have already noted some questions, and obviously, if some other of people on Zoom following, if they want to jump, somehow raise the hands, and I hope will be able. If we can keep this Q&A in 10-15 minutes, I know it's not enough, but it's always time constraining. That will be great. One question is coming from Rob van Ginegen, my dear colleague from Netherlands, and he is asking, looking at the fast polarity of individual transport in the Netherlands, e-bike and e-scooters, I wonder why there is not a development towards one of the two persons ultra-compact vehicles, a bit like Citroën Ami. Popularity was what I was trying to write. One of you can pick the question, please.
So I'm happy to pick up on that first, and I think the short answer is that regulation is a real challenge. These vehicles fall into a sector which is referred to as the L7 segment in European regulation. That's a bit of a horribly technical term, but at the moment the regulation for those vehicles has no crash standards, and there is a very open definition as to what the vehicle will be. And without those kinds of regulations in place, most manufacturers have been reluctant to bring forward large-scale products in that space. So I think what you're seeing is lots of small companies, SMEs, starting off with brilliant innovative concepts, but they're really struggling to be able to get the investment and the market traction that they need to become mass market. So what I'd really like to see is a concerted effort on improved regulation around those vehicle categories in order to create an environment in which they can succeed.
I think that's absolutely right, Dave, and I would add another issue, and that is the congestion issue in urban areas. I think a lot of these 1 to 2 seat vehicles are still too big in many ways for dense urban areas. They still get caught in the same traffic. They're too big to go in bike lanes and things of that sort. So, I think the challenge is how practical are they? In terms of use in an urban environment. They may be extremely good outside of urban areas, for example, and e-bikes are certainly very effective, for example, in rural areas where they can make perhaps a 10-mile trip viable by bike, which most people would not be willing to cycle. But I think in urban areas, I think that the size of these vehicles and the congestion issue still constrains their use.
And Andy speaking, I tend to agree. Actually, I was responsible for introducing Leaf, and quite shortly after that, taking the Renault Twizy and putting it under a Nissan brand. It didn't go particularly well, and I think it's neither a car nor a bike, and it sits in this difficult ground. And one is that I don't know whether you've ever tried a Twizy, but I have many times, especially around the streets of Paris, and it's a bit scary. I think where the interesting growth is in things like the electric scooters and the forecast that I'm looking off. I'm a director of a scooter company. It looks really interesting, but we need legislation to help us. At the moment, it's particularly, for example, in the UK, it's not possible for private ownership of e-scooters. And that's something that may need to be addressed. It is possible elsewhere in Europe, and obviously, as I've mentioned in my speech, you saw a massive increase in the hiring of e-scooters in Madrid. So I do think there is something very interesting there, but I think that footprint that Greg has alluded to is really important.
Another question is coming from Turkey, from our colleague from AUTOBEST jury, Okan Altan, which is asking, what about reducing the cobalt content to less than 10%? And of course, the intention to dispense with materials such as cobalt entirely through post-lithium ion technology with new compositions. I guess, Dave, is a question for you.
Yeah, so it is absolutely the industrial trend is to reduce the amount of cobalt that we put into batteries and ideally eliminate it completely. So the state-of-the-art production batteries today use either an NCA chemistry, which has typically about 5% cobalt in it, or it's an NCM 811, so about 10% cobalt in it. Certainly, we're working with battery companies at the moment on pre-production of 955. So that's with a 5% cobalt in a nickel cobalt manganese configuration. But I think we need to look back to some of the chemistries that we think we may have left behind, like lithium iron phosphate, where actually there is zero cobalt in those from the beginning. And in fact, they even avoid some of the difficult, nickel material is an expensive material to be building into batteries. So I think we have a number of different approaches that are all running in parallel. For as long as we are chasing ultimate energy density and long range, I think you're going to see that the nickel, cobalt, manganese chemistries tend to win out, albeit with reducing cobalt content. But where the really interesting battleground is that high volume, low range vehicle, where we don't have to have the highest energy density possible. And there, I think things like sodium ion and lithium iron phosphate, which have no cobalt in them at all, become very exciting options.
Absolutely. It's okay. I hope Okan is happy with that. Other questions? It's coming from Dave Humphrey from Ireland. It's correct? Dave, can you ask the question?
Hi everyone, if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you, please ask the question.
So I think we're all agreed that the path towards battery electric vehicles for consumers and cars is very clear in Europe, but for certainly here in Ireland, one of the issues is home charging for people. A lot of people don't have, for example, a garage or a driveway, or they have on-street parking that they can't actually plug in their car. How do you see this kind of hurdle being overcome on a local government level, or do you see this do you see battery technology improving to the point that people won't have to worry about this? Because as was discussed earlier, smaller batteries make more sense for urban dwellers, but that also means the need to charge more frequently.
Okay, who is going to answer?
Clearly a difficult question, so nobody.
No.
There's no point in putting big batteries into the vehicles. You're just carrying them around. I forget whether it was Dave's or Greg's chart that shows the miles done, and most people do very small miles. So clearly that infrastructure is really important. Getting chargers into building regulations. So whenever you're putting anything where you're parking cars, having the regulations state that you need to have a charger, I think is mandatory, without question. There's a lot of interesting work being done by the infrastructure companies, the charging companies, in things like curbway charging, and the technology of induction charging I've seen move enormously over the last 15 years. And some of that possibility where you simply dwell over a charging infrastructure with your vehicle, and you get like a scavenger charge, I think is also very useful. So I think it's a little behind, but it is catching up. But bigger batteries aren't the solution, that's for sure.
I would say that this issue of people without off-street parking is the biggest challenge that we face in terms of getting mass rollout of battery electric vehicles. I don't think there will be one solution. I think curbside charging, attaching to lampposts and things like that will play a role in this, but at the moment it's still expensive to charge in that way. I think urban fast charging hubs will come into existence much more. So people use a fast charging hub much as we use a filling station today. And with longer range batteries on the vehicles, those cars will perhaps only need to be charged once a week, or even less in some cases. Many urban drivers don't use their cars a great deal at all. I think there will be a role for more shared vehicles and shared electric cars, people actually giving up their car, and particularly Andy talked about that at the start of his presentation. So I don't think there will be one solution here that overcomes the problem. The other one, I think we will see more charging in supermarkets, in car parks, in gyms, destination type charging that people can use to provide top-up charges for their cars. workplaces will be another place a lot of people charge. So not one solution, but I think a network solution where people find multiple solutions to this challenge of people wanting to charge but who don't have a driveway.
I completely concur with that, Greg. If you look at the statistics of the miles driven by people who have access to off-street parking versus the miles driven by people who don't have access to off-street parking, you tend to find that those without off-street parking are living in a more urban environment where daily journey lengths are typically of the order of 5 or 10 miles, and a typical total daily is 20 miles. If that's the case, then your 150-mile range vehicle probably only needs charging once every 2 weeks. And you'll see the emergence of, so in the UK, we have BP and ChargeMaster, where BP have taken the forecourt infrastructure that they have, and they're putting fast chargers in place there. That means that you could take that 40 or 50 kilowatt hour battery vehicle, plug it into their fast charger on the forecourt. In a space of about an hour or less, probably half an hour, it would be full. And during that half hour, you go and shop at the mini market, which is on the same site, and you pick up your groceries for that evening or for the next couple of days. Likewise, places like supermarket charging can equally provide that level of charge for you in that dwell. So I think we need to recognize that one shape of charging is not going to be right for everybody. There'll be different patterns of charging and different solutions emerging from that. But I don't see lack of off-street parking as the barrier to EVs that perhaps we think today, simply because we don't yet have the infrastructure in place.
Okay, thank you very much. We approach the end of this session. I think Bogdan Bada want to ask a question, or Bogdan, it was right?
So, hello everybody, it's a pleasure to be together with you to this unique event in Romania. We have basically the opportunity to speak about the future of mobility, the shift from the actual fuel-powered vehicles to electricity and maybe hydrogen. And you already have a presentation of my colleague Bogdan Păun, which present the interest of Hydroelectrica in investing in this type of new technology. So, okay, there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of challenges in the face of this shift. At the end of the day, it depends on us and depend on the regulation, how fast we make this shift. So there are a lot of interesting presentations and news, at least for me, because we are our main and our core activity is producing electricity. We know very little about the technologies and about all the challenges that face the producers of the cars, the producers of batteries, and basically we know that we have two main bottlenecks. One is related to the infrastructure, second is related to the batteries, the size, the costs, and the autonomies of the battery. So I don't want to spare now the time about question, because there are a lot of them, and I hope that at the end of this session to also send to the participants the presentations, because they are detailed presentation, and I appreciate a lot the level of the discussions until now. So I also will make a presentation about our intention and also the challenges that also the producers of electricity and let's say the first part of the supply chain faced in order to develop at large scale basically the new wave of electric vehicles. So I don't want to put now a specific question, because there are a lot of them, but I want to address it later, maybe on email.
Thank you very much.
Because it is a lot of information.
Thank you.
Information that we received today. Yeah.
Thank you, Bogdan. Actually, Mr. Bada is the next speaker after this session is ending. There are two last questions, and I invite you, three of you, to answer extremely quickly, because I imagine your time is already over, spending so much with us. Thank you very much. One is about the solid-state batteries. Question is simple. When we will see, on an industrial scale, not on laboratory, a solid-state battery? Dave?
At least 8 years.
Thank you. Andy?
2030.
2030.
2030.
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I concur with that, but I don't actually think it matters, because I think the improvements which we will get from the existing lithium-ion chemistries and the way that Dave described their evolution will bring the cost down towards that critical $100 a kilowatt hour threshold. So I don't think it matters. We're going to get a mass transition without them.
Interesting. And the last question is regarding, is really the solar power to be used by cars in the future? I mean, should we expect to have such an efficient transformation of the light of the sun directly into the battery to propel the car, or is just a simple dream? What do you think?
No, I'm afraid, unfortunately, the physics doesn't allow for that as we have it today. The nearest I think you'll see to that is if you look at some of the three-wheelers that are used in Asia, so the auto rickshaws, for instance, where you've got strong solar radiation, very low energy consumption and a decent roof area. There it can be used to extend the range of the vehicle, but I'm afraid that the maths doesn't work to give enough energy that route to propel the vehicle in real time.
Andy?
I agree with Dave. You will have seen a cell on the spoiler of the Nissan Leaf. I'm afraid it's only recharging the traditional lead acid battery. It's not helping the lithium-ion battery at all, and it's more of a, did I say, more of a gimmick than a reality. So no, sun is great for for garnering clean energy that can go into the grid, but directly onto the car, no.
I think where we will see it is with home charging and people developing solar systems in their own homes, integrating their vehicles so they become self-sufficient. There, I think you will see an integration of the vehicle and solar cells, but not on the vehicle itself, but as part of a home charging system.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm applause to our international guest. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. Wish you all the best, and hopefully to some other editions in the future, you may join again AutoBest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.